I was driving home, the long day at the shop weighing on me. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Another Wednesday. Nothing special about it. It was just like every other damn day, and that was fine. Sometimes I think I'd rather have that steady grind than deal with the mess of trying to find meaning. It wasn't like I had much to look forward to anyway. Sarah and I, well, we hadn't been anything for a while. Not really. The headlights from the oncoming cars were blinding in my rearview mirror, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was just exhausted. Physically, mentally. I don't know when it started, but somewhere between the greasy motors and the broken parts, I started to feel like I was just passing through. I used to think I'd make something of myself. Now, I barely remembered what that felt like. I glanced over at the passenger seat. There were crumbs of a sandwich Sarah had left behind last night, half a bottle of water. We hadn't talked much recently. She was always working, always distracted. The silence between us was as loud as the engine humming beneath me. And then it happened. A flash of headlights. Too close. Way too close. I jerked the wheel to the right, but there was no time. The other car swerved into my lane, and I didn't have a chance to dodge it. The crunch of metal was deafening. It hit so hard, it felt like my body was going to snap in half. My head slammed against the window, and I tasted blood. Dazed, my vision blurred. I was still gripping the wheel, but my legs felt like lead. For a moment, everything went still. The car engine sputtered, and the scent of burning rubber filled my nose. My chest hurt, and my breath came in ragged gasps. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking. I had to let Sarah know. I had to tell her. Accident, need you, please come. I hit send, staring at the screen, waiting for her name to pop up. The minutes stretched on. I waited. No response. The ringing in my ears grew louder. Was she even going to answer? I stared at the phone screen, the world outside spinning, and something in me snapped. This was it. I couldn't even count on her when I needed her most. Still, I waited. I had to wait. But she didn't answer. The seconds felt like hours as I sat there in the car, blood trickling down my forehead, my chest still aching with every breath. I kept glancing at my phone, willing it to buzz with a message from Sarah. Nothing. The world outside seemed to move in slow motion. Cars passed, slowing down as they neared the wreck, then speeding up again. It was like I wasn't even there. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to move, but pain shot through my side. My seatbelt dug into my ribs, and my leg felt stiff. The adrenaline was wearing off, and everything started to feel heavier, more real. My head was spinning, my hands shaking. But the worst part was the silence. No one stopped. No one cared enough to stop. I was just another guy on the side of the road. A police siren broke through my thoughts, pulling me back to the moment. A squad car pulled up, its blue lights flashing, casting an eerie glow over the wreckage. The officer who got out was tall, his uniform crisp. He didn't rush, but he moved with purpose. "Hey, you all right?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. I swallowed, trying to focus. I don't know. I think I'm okay, just hurt. My words came out slurred, like my brain hadn't quite caught up with my mouth. He walked around the car, taking in the damage, then looked at me again. "You're bleeding. Head, leg?" He pointed to the cuts on my forehead and the tear in my pants where the metal had scraped me. "Yeah, I feel it. Just dizzy." I had to blink a few times to clear my vision. The officer knelt down beside the door and put his hand on the car frame, leaning in. "You've got to get out of here. Can you move?" I nodded, though every inch of my body screamed against it. The officer helped me open the door, his grip firm as I staggered out of the car. My legs were shaky, like they didn't belong to me anymore. He steadied me as I tried to take a step, and the pain nearly knocked me off balance. "Easy, just lean on me," he said, his voice low and steady. A paramedic, a woman with short brown hair, came over as I was halfway out of the car. She looked like she knew exactly what she was doing, moving quickly but not panicking. "You're gonna be all right," she said, her eyes scanning me. "Let's get you sitting down." I winced as she gently guided me to the side of the road, her hands checking my arm, my leg, and the gash on my forehead. The air smelled like exhaust and rubber, a harsh reminder that this could have been a lot worse. Head's bleeding, but nothing deep, she said, wrapping a bandage around my forehead. You might have a concussion, and you've got a bruise here on your side. Any other pain? I shook my head, but every movement felt like I was dragging my bones through concrete. I need to get in touch with my wife, I mumbled, pulling out my phone again. The woman, Anna, I saw her name tag, looked at me with a kind of sympathy in her eyes. She didn't say anything, just gave me a moment to type out another text. Sarah, I'm hurt. Please come. I need you. I hit send and stared at the screen. The seconds ticked by, then a minute, 2 minutes. I knew it. I absolutely knew it. She wasn't coming. The officer who'd been standing back, watching me, finally spoke. You're stable for now, but we're calling for an ambulance just to be sure. I barely nodded. I couldn't even bring myself to care much about that anymore. I had one last thought before my phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. I opened it, hands shaking. Having lunch with Greg. Just call an Uber. Already ordered food. It was like a punch to the gut. I felt every word hit me harder than the crash itself. My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak. My vision blurred again, and for a second, I thought I might just pass out right there on the asphalt. But I didn't. I didn't pass out. I stayed right there, still bleeding, still waiting. The officer looked at me, brow furrowed. He must have seen something in my face because he didn't ask me if I was okay. He just stood there, looking at my phone in my hand. You all right? He asked, though I knew he already had his answer. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I just handed him the phone. Tell her, I said, voice low, barely audible. Tell her what happened. The phone buzzed again, and I could barely bring myself to look at it. I knew. I knew what it would be, but I checked it anyway. Having lunch with Greg. Just call an Uber. Already ordered food. It was like I'd been punched in the chest. My breath caught in my throat and my hands went cold. I stared at the screen, barely processing the words at first. Greg, her coworker, Greg. That was who she chose over me. That was who she was spending her lunch with while I was sitting here, broken, bleeding, waiting for someone to give a damn. I didn't even know where to start. How could she send me that? How could she act like everything was just normal, as if I wasn't lying on the side of the road, wondering if I'd make it through the night? My pulse raced, and I could feel the anger crawling up from my chest, up my throat, threatening to spill out of me. The EMT, Anna, was still wrapping my arm in gauze. She was being gentle, calm, like I was just another patient she'd seen 100 times. She was good at her job, but there was no way she could know the storm that was brewing inside me. Any other pain? Anna asked, glancing up at me for a second. I barely heard her. All I could think about was Sarah. Sarah, who should have been here by now. I could feel the rage rising in me, but I didn't want to lose it in front of her, or the officer. Not yet. I needed to keep it together, at least for now. I stared at the text again. Greg, of all people. She couldn't be bothered to respond when her husband was in a damn car accident, but she could sit down and have lunch with him? I bit the inside of my cheek, holding back the sick feeling that was twisting my stomach. How long had this been going on? How long had she been pulling away from me, disappearing into her own world, into her work, into Greg? I thought I'd been imagining it, the way she'd started staying late, the way she'd stopped talking about her day when I asked, the way the silence between us was becoming more and more suffocating. But now it was all clear. She'd checked out. I felt humiliated, like I wasn't even worth the effort to pretend. That's what this felt like. She hadn't even tried. It didn't matter if I was bleeding or that I was hurt. She was busy. She was too busy. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to control my breathing. This wasn't supposed to be how it ended, but it was. I didn't know what I had been waiting for all this time, but I realized now that whatever it was, whatever hope I'd been holding on to, it was gone. Jack, Anna said softly, her hand still working on my arm. I think you're stable, but you need to get checked out at the hospital. I'm calling for transport. I barely heard her. The phone in my hand felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I wanted to throw it across the road. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Not here, not now. I turned to the officer, who had been standing back, watching me quietly. He must have seen something in my eyes because he stepped forward, his tone more serious now. Do you need me to call someone for you? He asked, his voice low. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to have to say the words. But they came out anyway, like they had been waiting to escape. Yeah, I said, voice tight. I need you to call her. I need you to tell her what happened. The officer didn't say anything at first. He just nodded, like he understood. You want me to let her know that it's serious? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Yeah. Tell her it's serious. Tell her I'm here, bleeding out on the side of the road, and she's sitting in some restaurant with Greg. Tell her I need her, and she can't be bothered to even answer her damn phone. I could hear the disgust in my own voice, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to hold back anymore. She needed to know. She needed to understand how badly she had messed up. The officer made a note, then turned toward his car, pulling out his phone. I'll let her know, he said, walking away. I watched him go, my heart still pounding, my head still spinning. Anna finished with the bandages, and her hands lingered on my arm for a second too long, like she was trying to comfort me in some way. I didn't have the energy to acknowledge it. I didn't need comfort. I needed Sarah to get her shit together. But even as I waited, even as I heard the officer dialing her number, part of me already knew nothing would change. I was done waiting. The officer didn't take long to get to the restaurant. I imagined him walking in with the same calm, professional air he had when he arrived at the accident site, not knowing he was about to pull the curtain back on the mess of my life. I couldn't see the restaurant from where I was, but I could picture it. The trendy downtown spot Sarah liked to visit for lunch. The one that made her feel important. The one she didn't invite me to anymore. I thought about all the times she'd taken longer than usual to answer the phone. All the times she'd put work or plans with friends ahead of me. It was all clear now. The officer walked in, the door chiming behind him. It was a quiet afternoon, maybe a little too quiet. But not for long. He had been told it was an emergency, and the urgency in his movements made the other diners look up. Sarah was at a corner table, her back to him. Greg was with her, leaning over the table, talking with his hands like he always did. The officer cleared his throat, and Sarah looked up. She blinked once, her eyes widening when she saw the uniform. Her face went pale, but there was something more to it. A flash of annoyance in her expression before she masked it with surprise. I could almost hear her thoughts. Why now? What's this going to look like? Excuse me, ma'am, the officer said, his voice steady. Are you Sarah Landon? She nodded, but her eyes flicked toward Greg, then back to the officer. She seemed uneasy. Greg, looking a little out of place in the middle of this, shifted in his seat, glancing between the officer and Sarah. Yes, that's me. Is there something wrong? She asked, her voice too light, too rehearsed. Like she was trying to downplay whatever was coming next. It was the kind of tone you use when you're about to brush off bad news. But I could feel it. The tension in the air. It was there. She felt it too. She just didn't want to show it. The officer's face didn't change. There's been an accident. Your husband, Jack Landon. He was involved in a car crash about 20 minutes ago. He's been injured, but it looks like he'll be okay. We just need you to come with us, ma'am. Her face paled, but it wasn't just shock I saw. It was panic. Not the kind you feel when you're worried about someone you love, but the kind you feel when you're worried about how you'll look, how your life might be disrupted. Oh my God, Sarah said, her voice suddenly sharp. She put her hand to her mouth, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't even moving toward the officer. Instead, she shot Greg a look, almost a silent plea to do something, anything, to make it all go away. Greg shifted in his seat, his lips pressing into a thin line. He looked uncomfortable, and for the first time since I'd met him, I couldn't blame him. He'd probably been sitting there this whole time, hearing her talk about me like I was some afterthought. But now, the reality of what was happening was starting to hit. I didn't know, Sarah stammered, but the words were too rehearsed. She wasn't even looking at the officer. Her eyes were darting around the restaurant, as if trying to figure out what kind of scene this would cause. I didn't think it was that serious. I thought he was just... Ma'am, this is serious, the officer interrupted, his voice still steady. He's been injured, and we need you to come with us, now. There was a moment of silence, and Sarah finally stood up. I saw her glance at Greg, her face tight. I need to let my boss know, she said, fumbling for her purse. I can't just leave without explaining. I'll meet you there, I promise. The officer didn't buy it. "I'm afraid that's not how this works. You need to come with me now?" Her face went slack, but there was no real emotion in it, no real fear, not the kind of fear you feel when you think you might lose someone you love. No, she was calculating, running through the social repercussions in her head. The officer could see it too. He stepped back, giving her a moment to collect herself, but his eyes were sharp. I didn't know what he thought, but I could tell he wasn't fooled. Neither was I. Greg stood up, but he didn't look at Sarah. He just glanced at the officer, then back at her. He seemed to be silently telling her to go. Sarah's gaze flicked back to the officer, and with a deep breath, she nodded. "Okay, I'll go with you." The officer gave a short nod, and they walked toward the door, Sarah trailing behind him. Greg stayed at the table, running his hand through his hair, looking down at the half-eaten lunch. I don't know if he felt bad, but it seemed like he didn't know what to do with himself. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to scream. But most of all, I wanted to know what the hell she was thinking. How someone could act so cold, so detached, when their husband was lying on the ground, broken and waiting. It was becoming more and more clear that whatever we'd had, whatever I'd thought we'd had, was over. The ride to the hospital felt endless, and not just because the EMT kept asking me questions I didn't want to answer. My head was still spinning, the pain from my side radiating with each bump in the road. But mostly it was Sarah. I couldn't shake the image of her, standing there, acting like the biggest crisis of my life was just a blip on her radar. She didn't even seem worried, not at all. By the time we reached the hospital, I was numb. They wheeled me into the emergency room, hooked me up to a few monitors, and ran some tests, but I couldn't focus on any of that. All I could think about was how Sarah didn't give a damn. I should have known. Hell, part of me did know. But I kept telling myself things would get better. I kept telling myself that whatever distance had been growing between us was just a phase, that it was just stress or work or something temporary. But now I was seeing the truth for what it was. She didn't care about me, not the way I cared about her, and I felt like an idiot for thinking she ever would. Anna, the EMT, was still hovering nearby, taking notes and checking on my vitals. She must have sensed something was off because she sat down beside my bed and looked me in the eye, a soft kind of concern in her voice. "You all right?" she asked, her tone gentle but knowing. "You seem quiet. More than just the shock, you know?" I didn't answer right away. What was there to say? "No, I'm not all right. My wife didn't give a shit enough to even answer my texts, let alone come to the scene of my accident." "I'm fine," I said, the words coming out more like a question than a statement. Just tired, I guess." Anna didn't buy it. "I get it. This kind of thing, it messes with your head. But if you ever need someone to talk to, you can always reach out. I know it's hard." I nodded, appreciating the offer, but I didn't have the energy for a therapy session right now. I just wanted to be left alone. I had enough on my plate without thinking about that. The silence between us stretched until my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen, thinking maybe it was Sarah. Maybe she was finally going to reach out, finally going to care. But it wasn't her. It was Mike. "Yo, you good? Just saw the pics. What the hell happened? Let me know if you need anything, man." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Mike always knew how to lighten the mood, but not this time. Not with everything that was happening. I tapped out a quick reply. "Not good. Car wreck. I'm okay though. Just messed up." He replied almost immediately. "Damn, that sucks, bro. Hit me up when you're out of there. Need anything? I'll grab beers when you're up for it. Could use a laugh after seeing the pics." The pics? What the hell was he talking about? I set the phone down, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in my gut. A few minutes later, the officer who'd visited Sarah earlier came into my room. He didn't look at me with pity, but there was something in his eyes, something that told me he knew exactly what had been going on. "Hey, Jack," he said, his voice low. "I just talked to your wife. She wasn't exactly devastated, if you know what I mean." I didn't say anything, but I could feel my blood boiling. "Look, I'm just doing my job," the officer continued, glancing at the door as if he wasn't sure how much he should say. "But I'm going to be honest with you. She didn't seem all that concerned, more worried about how this might look, if you catch my drift. She wasn't asking about you. not really. I nodded, but I didn't trust myself to speak. If I said anything, I was pretty sure I'd end up punching a wall or something. The officer gave a small nod, then turned to leave. But before he got to the door, his phone rang. He checked it quickly, his expression changing when he saw the message. "Sorry, Jack. Just got word from a friend of yours," he said, his tone flat. "Looks like Sarah's lunch date with Greg is making the rounds on social media. People are talking." That was the last straw. My head spun again, this time from the weight of the humiliation. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. It wasn't bad enough that my wife had ignored me when I needed her most. Now it was all over the damn internet. My phone buzzed again, and I almost didn't want to look, but I did. It was a message from another friend. "Dude, Sarah's lunch with Greg is blowing up. Everyone's sharing it. What's going on?" I couldn't stop myself. I had to see it. I opened the link, and there it was, Sarah and Greg, sitting at that stupid restaurant, smiling, like nothing in the world mattered except whatever bullshit they were talking about. People were commenting, sharing, laughing. They didn't know the full story, but they sure as hell were making it worse. I wanted to throw my phone. I wanted to break everything in sight. But I just sat there, staring at the screen, the anger bubbling inside me. This wasn't just an accident anymore. This was the moment I realized how little I meant to Sarah and how much I was willing to let go. I sat there in the sterile hospital room, my phone burning in my hand, the texts, the social media posts. It was all too much. But something in me snapped. I had spent months trying to rationalize Sarah's behavior, telling myself it was just a rough patch, that things would get better. But now, everything was out in the open. The truth was sitting there, staring me in the face. I couldn't just keep it all bottled up anymore, not after everything she'd done. I had to make it known. I had to show everyone who Sarah really was, because no one else seemed to get it. I wasn't going to let her hide behind excuses, pretending like nothing had happened. I opened up the text from Sarah, the one that had been burning a hole in my gut for the last couple of hours. "Having lunch with Greg. Just call an Uber. Already ordered food." I stared at it one last time, the words cutting deeper with every second. I screenshot the message. The evidence was right there. The proof that Sarah had chosen a lunch date with her coworker over her husband lying in a hospital bed, fighting to stay awake after a car crash. I took a breath, my fingers shaking as I sent the screenshot to our closest friends and family. I didn't care about the fallout. I didn't care about the mess it was about to create. I needed people to know the truth. I needed them to see how little she cared about me. Sarah chose lunch with Greg over my emergency. I wanted to be honest about what happened. I hit send. The phone buzzed almost immediately, then again and again. The responses came in fast, each one a mix of disbelief, anger, and confusion. "What the hell? Jack, are you serious?" Mike, "I can't believe this. I'm so sorry, man." Emma, "What's going on? She didn't even answer my text. What did she think this was?" Jake. My heart pounded as the messages piled up. Some of them were supportive, some were furious, and some were downright shocked. But I didn't care, not anymore. Sarah's betrayal was spilling out, and I could feel a sense of release, of vindication, even though it was burning me up inside. The relief of not being the only one who saw it. It was like a weight lifting off my chest. But the anger? That didn't go anywhere. It simmered under the surface, bubbling up with each new message. I scrolled through the responses. Some people were confused. "Are you sure about this? She's your wife, Jack." Others were furious. "She's the one who's been distant for months, man. I'm sorry you had to deal with this." Then another notification popped up. This one from my sister, Liz. "Everyone is talking about it, Jack. Her lunch date with Greg is going viral. People are roasting her online." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. It didn't surprise me. Sarah had always been so concerned with appearances. I imagined her right now, sitting in that trendy restaurant with Greg, pretending like this wasn't blowing up. Like the social media posts weren't piling up, each one more damning than the last. People were starting to see her for what she really was. The texts kept coming, some sympathetic, some outright angry. But they all had one thing in common. No one was taking her side anymore. I couldn't decide how I felt about that. Part of me wanted to feel victorious, like I was finally getting some justice, but another part of me just felt numb. I had trusted her. I had given her everything. And now, all I had was a phone full of messages and a heart full of betrayal. But I knew something else too. This wasn't just about the accident. It wasn't about the lunch with Greg. This had been building for months, years maybe. The emotional distance, the coldness, the way she'd stopped showing up for me when it mattered. I'd been too blind to see it, or too scared to admit it. I looked up from my phone, the buzzing now starting to quiet down as the messages slowed. I felt exhausted, empty. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to a marriage that wasn't there anymore. But now, with the truth out, I couldn't pretend anymore. I wasn't the victim of some random accident. I wasn't the victim of bad timing. I had been living in a lie, and I'd been too scared to call it out. But now, everyone knew. And Sarah? She couldn't hide behind her excuses anymore. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to keep pretending. I heard the door slam before I even saw her. Sarah stormed into the apartment like a hurricane, her face flushed with a mix of anger and desperation. She hadn't even bothered to knock. She was already halfway across the room, eyes blazing before she spoke. "Jack, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp, the words hitting like daggers. "This is insane. You're making a scene and—" I didn't let her finish. I wasn't in the mood for her excuses, not after everything. I stood up slowly, meeting her gaze. "Yeah, I think we do need to talk, because I need to know how you got so cold." Her eyes widened for a second, but she quickly recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice wavering just a bit. She took a step closer, her hands shaking at her sides. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Jack. I didn't think it was that serious. You were just in an accident. I thought you were fine. You were having lunch with Greg," I interrupted, my voice cutting through the air. "While I was lying on the side of the road, bleeding, unable to even get up, and you were more worried about how it looked than whether I was alive or dead." Her face turned red, but it wasn't from embarrassment. It was anger, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to come up with some kind of defense. But I wasn't interested in hearing it anymore. "I didn't think you were that hurt," she said, finally speaking as if she were trying to justify herself. "You've been in accidents before, Jack, and you don't always react well under pressure. I thought you'd be okay. I needed a moment too, you know? I've been stressed out with work. Everything's been so much lately." Her voice trailed off, but she kept trying to justify herself. "I just needed to breathe for a second." "Breathe?" I asked, disbelief creeping into my voice. "You needed to breathe? I'm the one who needed you, Sarah. I'm the one who needed you there, and you chose Greg over me. What kind of person does that?" She looked away, shifting uncomfortably like she could avoid the truth if she didn't make eye contact. "I didn't think it was that big of a deal," she said again, her words coming out more quiet now, more like an excuse than an explanation. "I didn't think it was serious." "Didn't think it was serious?" I repeated, my chest tight with a mix of rage and hurt. "I'm hurt bleeding, Sarah. And you couldn't even answer my texts, and you didn't think it was serious? Jesus." She started pacing now, her eyes darting around the room. "You're overreacting, Jack," she shot back, her tone defensive. "You're trying to make me look bad. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know. I didn't realize how bad it was. You always exaggerate everything. I didn't think you'd blow it up like this." Her words stung, but they didn't cut as deep as they used to. "I'm not exaggerating, Sarah," I said quietly. "I'm not the one who's been pretending everything's fine when it's not. You've been checked out for months, and I've been trying to make excuses for you, for us. But you've been gone for a long time. I just didn't see it until now." She stopped in her tracks, her face twisting in disbelief. "What? That's crazy. You're making it sound like I've been ignoring you on purpose." "I haven't been ignoring you, Jack. I've just been busy." I felt my pulse spike, the anger rising again. "Busy? Is that what you're calling it now? You've been too busy for your husband, Sarah. Too busy to even care if I was okay. Too busy to pick up the phone. You didn't care enough to come when I needed you most. And now you want to pretend it's just stress or work. I don't buy it anymore." Her lips pressed together in a thin line. She took a deep breath, like she was trying to regain control. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said. But there was something off in her voice, something that made me realize she wasn't even convincing herself anymore. "You're trying to make me look like the villain, but you're overreacting. We can fix this. Just calm down and—" I shook my head, finally feeling a weight lift off my chest. "No, Sarah, we're done. You've shown me exactly who you are, and it's not someone I want to be with. Not anymore. You're not capable of what I need. I need someone who's there when it counts, not someone who's more worried about her lunch date than her husband." Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw the panic flicker there, but it was too late. I was done. "I'm done," I repeated, this time with finality. "And so are we." She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I didn't give her a chance to argue. I turned and walked past her, toward the door. I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I wasn't going to fight for something that wasn't even real anymore. When I opened the door, she was still standing there, staring at me, trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. "I'm done," I said again, the words heavier this time. I closed the door behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the kind I had hoped for, but it was enough. I sat across from my lawyer, the divorce papers spread out in front of me like a final, ugly truth. She was a calm woman in her 40s, her face unchanging as she shuffled through the documents. But I didn't need her to tell me what came next. I knew what this was. This was the end. The pen in my hand felt too light, like it was floating in air as I signed the first page. Each stroke of ink felt like it carried a weight I didn't want to bear, but I knew it was necessary. This wasn't just a legal matter. It was the last step in a long journey of things I'd ignored, things I'd missed for too long. I glanced at the papers, the text already blurry in my mind. There it was, in black and white. Divorce. "Is that everything?" I asked, my voice steady, maybe a little too steady. The lawyer nodded. "Yes, this is just the start of the process, but we can proceed as soon as you're ready." I signed a few more lines, then handed it back to her. She gave me a brief nod before turning her attention to the pile of paperwork. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the sterile white walls of her office, and I realized I wasn't even angry anymore. It wasn't relief either, not completely. It was just quiet. It felt like the calm after a storm, but the storm wasn't over. I was still working through it, still letting the hurt sink in. I remembered how Sarah used to be, how we used to be. I thought about our first apartment, how we'd laughed and talked about our future. I'd been so sure we were on the same page, that we were building something solid, but somewhere along the way, things had shifted. She'd pulled away, little by little, until I didn't even recognize the person I was living with anymore. How many red flags did I ignore? How many nights did I sit in silence, waiting for her to look at me the way she used to, only for her to slip further away? I thought about the times I tried to reach out, tried to talk to her, the work stress, the late nights, the half-hearted apologies. Every time, I thought maybe we were getting somewhere, but I was just fooling myself. She had checked out long before I realized it, and when I needed her the most, when my life was literally falling apart, she chose lunch with Greg. That was the truth I couldn't ignore anymore, but here I was, taking the first real step toward moving on, toward getting out of the mess I'd let myself get stuck in. As I left the lawyer's office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my brother, Paul. He'd been calling me nonstop since the accident, but I hadn't picked up. I didn't know what to say to him. But now the message seemed like a sign. "You good, man? Let me know if you want to talk. I'm here for you, no matter what." I sat down on the steps outside the office and called him back. He picked up after the second ring. "Jack," he said, his voice warm and steady. "I've been trying to get a hold of you. You all right?" "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, but the words felt hollow. I wasn't fine, not really. But I didn't want to get into it with him, not yet. Just busy. I heard about everything with Sarah. Man, I'm sorry. There was a pause, and I could hear the concern in his voice. "I know this shit isn't easy, but you don't have to go through it alone. You've got me, all right?" I swallowed, feeling something tighten in my chest. Paul had always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I felt like I was holding back, like if I said the wrong thing, I'd lose this little bit of support I still had left. "I don't know what I'm doing, Paul," I admitted, the words coming out quieter than I intended. I never thought it'd end up like this, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I'm just done. I get it, he said, his voice firm. You deserve better, Jack. You've been putting in all the work, and she's been out there doing God knows what. Don't let her drag you down. You don't owe her shit. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yeah, I think you're right. I'll be there for you, bro. You don't have to do this alone, Paul said, his voice low, like he understood what I was going through. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Thanks, I appreciate it. We talked for a few more minutes, and when I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time in a long time, I was making a decision that was about me. No more holding on to something that wasn't real. That night, I packed my things. The apartment didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place where I had been pretending to live, trying to hold on to a life that was already slipping through my fingers. As I loaded the last of my boxes into the car, I realized that leaving this place, leaving Sarah, was the first step toward getting my life back. I didn't know what was next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I stood in the middle of the small, empty apartment, the boxes stacked around me like walls closing in. The place wasn't much, but it was mine. A little two-bedroom unit on the edge of town, far from the apartment Sarah and I had shared. It smelled like fresh paint and dust. Nothing familiar, nothing that reminded me of her. It wasn't glamorous. The furniture was secondhand, the walls bare except for a couple of cheap prints I'd picked up at the local thrift store. But as I unpacked, setting things down in their new places, there was a quiet kind of peace settling over me. I wasn't just rearranging my stuff, I was reorganizing my life, piece by piece. As I set the last box down and looked around, I felt something like relief. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I wasn't waiting for someone to show up. I wasn't hoping Sarah would walk through the door and make it all better. This was just me, on my own terms. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sitting down on the couch with my feet on the coffee table. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Mike. Hey man, heard you're officially free. Congratulations on getting out of that toxic shit. I leaned back, a small laugh escaping me. Free. That's exactly how I felt. The weight of the last few months, hell, the last few years, had been dragging me down. But now, it felt like I could breathe again. Thanks, man. It feels different, but good. I'm getting settled in. Mike's reply came almost immediately. Hell yeah, man. You deserve better than that. I know it's not easy, but you're better off. You got this. His words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't really talked to anyone about how it felt to walk away from a marriage. Everyone had their opinions, but Mike was one of the few who didn't sugarcoat things or try to make me feel better for the sake of it. He just told me how it was. You're better off. And he was right. I took a sip of my beer, watching the light outside start to fade as the city stretched out before me. The window in this new place wasn't much to look at, but it was enough. I could see the city skyline in the distance, the lights flickering on one by one. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that meant something. The apartment was quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. It felt like I was on the edge of something. Not a big dramatic change, but something. I wasn't going to stay stuck in the past anymore. I thought about Sarah for a second, about how her absence had already started to feel like a distant memory. The anger was still there, but it was fading. The betrayal still stung, but it wasn't all consuming anymore. I had learned a lot over the past few weeks, about who I was, what I was willing to put up with, and what I was finally ready to let go of. And I realized, as I stood up and moved toward the window, that I wasn't the same person I was when I walked into this mess. I was stronger, I was freer, and I wasn't going to waste any more time on something that didn't deserve me. I looked out at the city again, the lights flickering below, and for the first time in a long time, I felt open. Like life wasn't closing in on me anymore. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It was real, and for the first time in a while, I was excited about what came next. I didn't know what the future held, but whatever it was, I was ready.